Welcome to WitchLit, a place to talk about the craft of writing and writing the craft. I'm your host, Victoria Raschke, author, publisher, witch, and nosy Scorpio. You can support WitchLit and the serious book habit it requires at ko-fi.com/WitchLit podcast. And you can be part of the show by sending in your own death, sex, religion, politics, money questions for our guests to victoria@witchlitpod.com. If you like what we're doing here, please subscribe and give us a rating or review wherever you listen to podcasts. It really does help other witches find the show. Here's to never getting to the bottom of our to-be-read piles. Raechel Henderson is a dual-class seamstress shieldmaiden. She is the author of So Witchy, Tools, Techniques, and Projects for Sewing Magic, as well as The Scent of Lemon and Rosemary, Working Domestic Magic with Hestia, both from Llewellyn Worldwide. You can find her on Instagram, Facebook, or at her blog, idiorhythmic.com, where she writes about magic, creativity, living by one's own life patterns, her family, and books. Raechel Henderson, welcome to WitchLit.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on. I enjoyed So Witchy a lot. We were talking a little bit before, and I am a sewer and an embroiderer, so it hit a lot of my happy places. But our first question for everyone on the show is, in this age of all these different ways to communicate, and especially for creative people who, may have other pursuits, why write? Why write books?
Because I've always wanted to be an author. Books have always had a very special place for me. Like, even before I knew how to write, I would do these little scribbles and pretend that I was a journalist or a writer or something like that. And I've just always found, I'm 46, so I grew up before the internet. So books were the way that you got information. Mm-hmm. And I feel like books are still relevant, even though there's all these other ways to get information and communicate. I'm not a book fetishist where I feel like, you have to have, there's nothing, people who say there's nothing like the feel of a book in your hand. My response is always, well, there's nothing like the ability to get information whenever at your fingertips when we have smartphones and stuff. But yeah, for me, there's still something about holding a book and reading out of one. But I'm also just mostly about the information in it. And I find that books are still just convenient ways to get information to people, especially for longer forms, whereas the internet is much better for shorter, bite-sized pieces of information.
Yeah, I think a writer is a writer, regardless of what you're doing, if you're blogging or publishing books or poetry or whatever. But I do think it is interesting to look at it as a form, like what is best suited to what form, especially when, trying to get kind of nonfiction, material out there, like just the difference between writing a blog post on, say, like, here's how to do this one thing versus your book, which I love is described on the back, I think, is part grimoire and part spell book and part pattern book. I can't remember exactly the wording, but just this idea that it's like, here's these kind of treatises on different ways you can incorporate magic, but here's actually the pattern to do it. Like, here's the things you need to make this happen.
It's funny because the first, the title that I was pitching it under, I called it, the subtitle was A Sewist Book of Shadows. Mm-hmm. That was the whole point, is I wanted to share, like, the first part is theory and the second part is practicum. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I do like the way that you weave that in, like, even in the part that's theory, you're still talking about, because we're talking about very concrete things, sewing and like the magic of that these are, I don't know, it's kind of like that weird, it's like the egregore of sewing almost, like, humans have had to make their own clothing for so long. And just the idea of doing that act of sewing is something that, our ancestors back to the beginning of when we were upright and were clothing, we're making the same action, doing those same actions and like what's embedded in that. So I love that you talk about that idea in the book.
Yeah. Having grown up, like I come from a long line of sewists, my grandmother and my mom, and all the way back. I come from, my family has always been very much make do people. Mm-hmm. So it always just was, okay, yeah, you sew clothes, you sew dolls, whatever. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until I got out of the home, out of my childhood home, that I came to realize that a lot of people don't sew and don't know how to do stuff. And I'd have people be like, well, can you sew this button back on for me, or stuff like that. And I was like, it was a little bit of a culture shock for me. And yeah, thinking about how up until, even 2 generations ago, most people just made their own clothes. They made their own linens and furnishings and the like, and how we have we had this sudden dramatic shift to everything coming from industrial and factory made things, to the point where sewing for yourself either is considered kind of it gets the split between either it's something magical where they're like, oh my goodness, you have this knowledge and you make this stuff for you, or it's considered kind of low class. Oh, you don't have the money to just go out and buy new. You repair this tear in your shirt or whatever. And it's just a very weird it's a weird kind of conflict between the two ideas. And so I think kind of remembering that we have been sewing for forever kind of helps alleviate that kind of tension a bit, I think.
Yeah. Well, and I think I love that there's this like small undercurrent of like visible mending and like those kind of things, talking about, kind of that make do and mend mentality, like you were commenting on that, this fast fashion, this, throwing it away because you need to put a button on it. Like, that's not good for the planet. Like, that's not good for anything. So learning those skills, I think, is important. And, yeah, I think about what you said about people think, like sewing your own clothes. I grew up, in the 70s and 80s. And my mom made most of our clothing, or we got it secondhand. Like, I don't think I knew new clothes came from the store till I was in high school, because I was at the tail end of a bunch of kids. So I have one little brother and everybody else was older. And, I look back on it now, and my sister and I would roll our eyes about the fact that my mom made her clothes, but like, it was a lot of labor to do that. Like, to make our clothes was a lot. To get patterns and material. And like now it is cheaper to go buy an item of clothing than to make it yourself often, because, material is actually expensive. The thing that you're not paying for with those cheap clothes is people's labor. So
exactly.
Yeah, I think that's, I think just, when you think about being able to do it and having the knowledge to sew, and like you said, it's not common anymore that people do sew or know how to sew. And I think, like, growing up, like, the sewing machine was always set up in our house. Like, mine is not set up in my apartment because I don't have a place to put it right now. But yeah, I mean, that was just something we did. It was something my grandmother did. And like you said, it's just part of the life we had.
It was an appliance. Yeah, it was an appliance like a refrigerator or an oven or, going in my family, at least, everybody had a sewing machine. And, even if you didn't sew clothes, we were sewing dolls or sewing tea towels, people cross-stitching, embroidering. My mom would make dolls. My grandmother made stuffed animals for all the grandkids, along with other stuff. My aunt, one of my aunts, she belonged to a church that had certain rules about length of skirts and the like. So she was always lengthening the skirts on my cousin, and so adding, and she would make beautiful like embroidery and lace and trim and all this stuff. I was always so jealous about like how fancy her clothes were. So yeah, it's one of those things where, you know, and also I grew up, and you probably grew up too, where you had a home economics class in middle school. So you, and they taught you how to sew and the like. And there's, I think a lot of places have kind of ditched those kind of crafty lessons. So that's where we're at now, where people don't know how to do any of this.
Yeah, I went to a high school that was a ag school, like in the 30s. They built it to get farm kids to stay in school, basically. And so it was like all the guys and some girls took agriculture all 4 years of high school, and then I took 4 years of home ec, basically. So, you know, and then I learned to sew at home ec, but I had already learned to sew at home. So I got in trouble a lot with my home ec teacher because I was doing things the wrong way, because I was doing them the way my mom showed me how to do them, and I would get in trouble. And she was like, Ashki, no, this is not how you do this. I was like, well, that's how my mom showed me to do it. She goes, no, it's not how you do it. So that was, you know, always amusing. But yeah, I mean, I loved being able, you know, even though I grew up in, you know, rural East Tennessee, like I was you know, proto new wave or goth kid, so that I could make my own clothes was great. Or I could get stuff from the Salvation Army and refashion it, you know. That was pretty cool. But yeah, and I had friends who sewed. I had a friend who like drafted her own patterns and made her own clothes and stuff too. So I never was much of a pattern drafter. That's one of those sewing tasks that intimidates me a little bit.
I get that. I totally get that.
So what was the impetus to like kind of put this book out in the world and kind of show that overlap of the magical and the mundane and so?
So in 2008, I got divorced, and I had a 4-year-old. I had been out of the workforce since I was pregnant with her. And that's 2008. Everything was collapsing.
Yeah.
It was an awesome time to get divorced and be like, okay, what am I going to do? And I'd had basically minimum wage jobs before that. So I had to do something. I was like, okay, I just need something that will pay the bills until she's old enough to go to school, because then I can go to work. Because at the time, you know, any job I got, all the money would have gone to childcare. So what I did is I had been sewing a little bit, and I had started, I was LARPing, which is live action role play. And I had a bunch of friends who were, okay. Well, in case anybody else isn't familiar, and my friends were like, can you sew costumes for us? And I was like, sure, I can do that. So I had been doing some of that, and I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to try sewing for a living. And so I spent many years sewing costuming and bags and stuff, and going to events and selling them. And as I was doing this, I would do stuff like if it was something for sale, I would use my green-headed pins to pin it up, because I'm like, okay, let's bring that money energy in. And I'm writing sigils on my sewing machines in like green magic marker, you know, just doing everything that I can to kind of bring this, you know, I'm putting sachets of mint in with my inventory before I take it to events. And as I was doing that, I was like kind of building a grimoire for myself, a book of shadows of sewing magic. And I had, I got remarried, and after I had my son, I had a really bad case of postpartum depression, like really bad. And this was around 2011. It wasn't until 2014 that I was able to, because of the ACA, I was able to start getting like medication help. But I was struggling a lot those years. And during those years while I was struggling, and then once I started getting medication, I was like, okay, I need something where I can stay home more and not have to travel as much. And so I was like, well, I have all these little things that I've written about, jotted these notes down about spell stuff. Let's see if I can write a book about, sewing magic. And my original plan was just to self-publish it, just put it up on Amazon as an ebook and, do that kind of, see if that would generate some income so I wouldn't have to travel as much. And I had somebody said, well, why don't you try to why don't you try to find a publisher for it? And I'm like, I don't think anybody's going to want, it's just so niche. And I just don't think that there's really an audience, but okay, I'll give it 6 months. I'll try for 6 months to see if I can find a publisher. And at the end of 6 months, if I can't, well, it's only been 6 months, and then I could go ahead with my self-publishing. And then Llewellyn was just immediately like, yeah, no, we would like this. And even my editor, Alicia, was like, when I read the pitch, I was like, sewing and magic, that's really niche. But she's like, but then I read your writing, and I'm like, okay, we can do something with this. So
yeah. Well, and I think, one of the things I like about the book is that, it is focused on sewing and kind of not magic and embroidery and cross stitch and all that, but it also does set a mind to thinking about all the other things you do in your life. I mean, there's a lot of books about kitchen witchery and all of that, and it's kind of in that same vein of and we were talking before that our lives are so full and so busy that if you can incorporate doing your magic for the outcomes you want, for the people you care about, for the world, into what you're doing already. I mean, it just seems like, I don't think magic shouldn't be work. Like, you should work to get those outcomes that you want. And there are things you need to do, but you're doing the work anyway. So make it magical.
Yeah. Oh yeah, exactly. And that was the thing. And I still, because I still go in and sell at events and the like. And I still have, I have a little money jar where I got my coins and my rice and my mint and my other stuff in it that I sit right beside my my card reader for when I'm at an event. And I think, and again, I was mentioning before that our lives are so compartmentalized that working your magic into stuff that you're already doing, working into your crafting, working into your making is a way to kind of tear down some of those walls and get back to where we used to be, where everything was interconnected.
Right.
It wasn't separate. And yeah, no, magic should be work you are working towards, but there's nothing saying that if you're making a scarf you're making scarves this winter for your family, throwing in some love and health magic into that, throwing in some stuff to boost their immune system and the like, to help with keeping them warm and keeping them safe from colds and the RSV that is going through the country right now. That is, it doesn't take anything more than intention.
Yeah.
It just takes you going, and that's what magic is intention. So if you're already putting your focus on something, you can just kind of weave in and bolster that intention.
Yeah.
And I think that is a great way for people who may not have thought before about how to get their magic out of the circle and into their lives. And if you're already doing some sort of crafty project, I think that this kind of helps people go, oh, okay, that makes sense. Much like kitchen witchery gets people going, oh, yeah, if I'm making this meal already and I'm already using these ingredients that already have these magical correspondences, I can just kind of put it all together.
Yep. But I do think there is this, I don't know. I mean, I personally don't have it, and I don't know many people, but you do read about it and see people talk about this idea of like high and low magic, and, you know, kitchen witchery and head witchery, and these things are kind of different than like people who do more structured ceremonial magic. And I was like, this is all tapping the same source. You know, it's all tapping the same source. So I don't really have that, but I do think that there is still this kind of weird separation between like the home and practice, or something that is, you know, it's just kind of that, like I said, in high school, the girls were taking home ec. You know, it wasn't the only guys that took home ec was the football team, because they had practice during the time that ag was. I mean, so, you know, it's like, you know, it was just this like weird separation of like, this is a woman's sphere or whatever. And I'm like, to me, that is garbage. It's like that, you know, everyone should be in the kitchen because that's where the food is. You know, it's like everyone should have some of these skills. I mean, you just need them to live. I mean, you just need a lot of these skills to get by. You need to know how to cook yourself something to eat, or at least reheat something. You need to know how to take care of clothes, even if you don't know necessarily how to make them from scratch. You still need to know how to care for them, which is part of that realm of sewing, is like, you know, mending, fixing a hem, you know, those kind of things. Like, I think it's, I don't know. I like the idea of it being, like you said, like not separated. Like it's all of a piece. These things that we do just sounds slightly idyllic, but also lovely. So.
Well, I think we got, in some ways, close to it in 2020 and 2021 when people were home and when we had shutdowns and we had people working from home, that all of a sudden you have, well, I'm working from home. I have, you know, I've done all the work that I need to do. I have this downtime that otherwise, if I was at work, I'd either trying to be looking busy, or I'd be using that time talking to people or something. Well, I'm home. I might as well start some bread. I'll, you know, do a little bit of cleaning and stuff like that. So I think we got close to that in certain ways, where back to, you know, centuries before, where our ancestors, they worked and they lived and everything came out of their home, and a lot of their homes were one room cottages or apartments, flats, that sort of thing, where that's the entirety of your life was out of this one place. And so I think we kind of got a little bit of that going on in at the height of the shutdowns and remote work and the like.
Yeah. It's funny to me, like the things that became, like, especially like in those early parts when everybody was, for the most part, home, except people who absolutely couldn't be, that, you know, the things that people turned to is like making, like you said, making bread, and, you know, like, and we couldn't get things because stuff wasn't available or things were closed. So people were like, oh, this is how I've been making my own cleaner for the counters, or, you know, it's just funny to me. Like you said, yeah, that was, yes, the lockdowns were not great, or whatever passed for a lockdown in the United States. I think we didn't have lockdowns like they did in other places in the world, but, you know, it was, the reason for it was horrific and is still horrific. The, you know, the situations around it, but there were these weird things that came out of it that I think gave us glimpses of maybe a better life.
Yeah, absolutely.
I also think about, like, you know, I know the one that really struck me is was like the canals in Venice clearing, because I've been to Venice a couple times, and it's kind of smelly. And I was like, that must have been amazing to be a person who lives in Venice, not to be inundated by tourists, for one, like, you know, and then to walk outside and see dolphins in the canals for the first time in your life. That had to be pretty weird. So weird stuff, and not really about writing or sewing, but I love the idea of your other book, which I have not read yet, The Scent of Lebanon Rosemary. And so how did you come to work with Hestia? I've always been fascinated by her as a goddess.
Yeah, well, back actually, I know exactly when I first was introduced to Hestia. It was back in 1999. Because I grew up Baptist and didn't really know that there was other stuff out there until I went away to college. Got introduced to first Wicca and then the larger pagan witchcraft via Cunningham, which I think is pretty much the story for anybody my age. The solitary Wicca and living Wicca, those two, you're just like, yep, that's the gateway. And I quickly moved on from Wicca. It just wasn't the right fit for me. But I was doing a lot of research, reading a lot of books, and I came across Hestia, and she resonated with me so deeply about this, the home and the hearth and all of that. And then life happened, and Hestia has always been kind of at the back, just kind of standing back, waiting patiently, just like, okay, I see you've got all this other stuff going on. You're in this really horrible relationship, but that you're going to have to work your way through that, but I'll be here on the other end when you're ready. And so it took about almost 20 years for me to come around and be like, okay, get out of that relationship, get settled into my new life. And then all of a sudden Hestia is like, okay, you ready? And I'm like, yeah, I'm ready to, like, I lost my house in the span of a couple years. I lost my house. We were homeless for about 6 weeks while we were trying to scramble. We were scattered across the country. My husband, my son were out here in Wyoming. I was still in Illinois with my daughter. And being that unsettled and being that fractured just really drove home that I needed something stable and I needed home. And so once we got our feet underneath us, I was like, okay, yeah, no, this is, I'm ready now. And Hestia is like, awesome. So now you're going to write a book. I'm like, okay, sure. And just looking at, how, and I actually was writing this book in 2020. So like at the beginning of, I thought I was going to have 6 months. I'm going to have 6 months of the kids are at school. My husband's out at work. We were sharing a house with some friends. They were going to be at work. I'm like, I'm going to have all this time to myself, just sit here and just bask in Hestia and write this book. And then COVID hit and everybody's home. Everybody. So it was a little bit of a challenge.
The opposite of what you thought was going to happen. The exact opposite of what you thought was going to happen.
Exact opposite. But it really was just, I viewed it as an object lesson in, we want safety and our homes are supposed to be a safe place, and yet we spend so much time away from our homes, and oftentimes for a lot of people home isn't a safe place. So it was an exploration of, okay, how can people use magic to make their home a safe place, and how can they work with Hestia, who is not only about the home but also because Hestia, while she's the goddess of the hearth, she is also the first, called the first and the last, the first bites of a mill, the first portions of sacrifice go to her. For the Greeks, she was, they would pledge their oaths they would make their oaths of office to her. So it wasn't just the interior sphere, and it wasn't just all homeward facing. There's the idea that I kind of expand on in the book is the home is the smallest unit of the entire community. Mm-hmm. And so when you are safe and when you are strong in your home, then the community benefits from that, especially if all of the homes are safe and secure. And it was the timing this was the book I was supposed to be writing at this time, where people were just experiencing a lot of uncertainty, more not feeling safe, not feeling secure in all of their environments. And so we all retreated to our homes. And how do we secure ourselves when everything around us seems to be falling apart?
So how did you find a place in that kind of chaoticness to carve out time to write?
I specifically, it was difficult because the kids were doing remote learning. My husband was working from home, and it became a collaborative effort. Like, it was a team effort where, you're taking care of getting the kids up in the morning. I'm taking care of making sure that they're staying busy, doing what they need to do, and a whole lot of late night writing sessions. I'm naturally a night owl, so during the day it was testing out the recipes, making sure that I had the cleaning, because there's a whole portion in there. Someone described it as a witchy home economics book, which is exactly what it is. I love that description of it. So during the day, it was doing all of the practical stuff of, okay, how does this all fit together? And at night, just wearily typing away at my at my computer and just writing notes. Like, this book is scattered across several different notebooks where I was just writing stuff down when I had a moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wrote. I write fiction usually, but I wrote like a companion cookbook, witchy book for the series during COVID. And so I was testing recipes and doing stuff like that. And then I had recipe testers too. And it was that same kind of just like the chaos of trying to do this. And like, bless the people who agreed to test recipes, because like shopping was difficult, you know, like, and some of the recipes had kind of weird ingredients. And so I was like, if you can't find anything, let me know and I'll send it to you, you know, just like this insane thing. But yeah, it was the only way to get through that was community and collaboration for me. And it sounds like for you too, that was the only way to get stuff done.
Yeah, it took a lot of, basically having to enforce boundaries, which was difficult. But like with my kids being like, look, this is my writing time, so you guys have to go to bed on time. You have to, and having some responsibility for stuff as well. But yeah, it was not easy. And then I did my third book, which was at the tail end of all of this, and I don't think I'm ever going to get a chance to just sit down and write for 8 to 5 and not have stuff pop up. I don't think that's eventually my your kids path will be as a writer.
Eventually your kids will be grown. I mean, that's where I am now. My kids are all at the house. Yeah. That's a different. I say my kids. I have a son, and then I have bonus daughters, and our bonus daughter would live with us sometimes, but very infrequently.
Yeah, right now right now my 18-year-old, she graduated in May and she's taking a gap year, so she's still home. She moved with us, and she's still home. It's okay. I like having all my family around me.
Yeah, no, I think just having lived overseas for a tiny portion of my life, and this very American idea that you turn 18, you leave is so American. Like most people don't work that way. Most families don't work that way. And I do like that. I mean, one of my slivers of a better life during COVID was that all of my kids came. My son and his partner were living with us because they were saving up money to move. And then my bonus daughter from Atlanta came because she lost her office job, was working remote, and one of her jobs was just closed. And she was in between apartments, and we're like, just come home. So we were all home and it was great. I mean, it was chaotic to have 5 adults living in a house trying to figure out who needed to scrub the toilet next, but it was great. It was also great. Like, I just loved having them there. It was like Christmas for 4 months in a weird way. I mean, yeah, things were bad and money was weird and my kids had lost their jobs and, all that kind of stuff. But we made it work because there were 5 of us figuring out how to make it work. It was kind of nice. And I think we all look back on that time, despite the weirdness and the bad things about it, it was really pleasant to spend that time together, kind of uninterrupted. So, yeah, I don't know. I think that it speaks to that part about Hestia, I think, too, is that that is not just the home, it is community that she is, in charge of, I guess, however you want to look at that. And I do think that is one of the things about our modern life. So we are missing out on the community part for the most part. We are kind of isolated in our homes.
It's true. And it's just, especially here in America, it's so difficult with the way things are set up and with work, this whole idea of, you go to work for 8 hours a day, except for it's not just 8 hours a day because you have your commute there and you commute back. And then once you get home, it's trying to fit in all that other stuff that you couldn't do that needs to be done, cooking and cleaning and everything. And by the time you got that all done, you're exhausted and so you try to cram all the parts of community into 2 days, the weekend, which then doesn't really leave you any room for rest, relaxation, and it just kind of splinters stuff. And so people who, when you see strong communities now, that's a testament to the will of the people in that community, that they are putting that effort into it. And I don't think that I certainly don't blame people who are exhausted by this whole 9 to 5 5-day-a-week life, because it is tiring. It is exhausting, and it doesn't leave you with the mental or any of the resources that you need to then reach out to do more than just survive. There's not a lot of room in there for thriving.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I don't know. I feel like I should polish the soapbox for you to kind of yell that to the rafters.
No.
So.
Oh no.
I just feel that way too. Like there's a part of community that's missing. And I think, a lot of us try to build community the best we can, like you said, on the weekends, online. I mean, a lot of community happened online during the pandemic, and I think is continuing that way. I mean, I have a group of people that I know in person from Nashville. When I lived in Nashville, writers group that we talk on Tuesdays. We just get together on Zoom and talk on Tuesdays if we can. And it's great to keep in touch with them that way, but I miss seeing their faces in person. It's,
it's really hard because like I have a community online, and online communities are great for filling in some of those gaps. The problem is that it misses that physical component. So like if my friends are having, I have friends all over the country and all over the world. If one of them's having a hard time, I can't just make a casserole and take it to them. Because they're in Iowa or they're in, the Netherlands or that. So I can't do the things that I normally would be able to do if they were living down the street or, across town. I can't go and give them a ride if they're like, oh, I need to get to this appointment, but my car broke down. Mm-hmm. So it's online community is great. And I don't want to dismiss that at all, because for a lot of people, that's the only community that they can get. People who are disabled or homebound or in areas where that are not friendly to them, to trans people who may have to hide who they are because they're living in some rural area. Online communities are great. It's hard to be supportive beyond just giving words of support.
Yeah.
It's hard to manifest that physically. Mm-hmm. And so that's the trade-off, I guess.
Yeah. So we need the Hestia book on building local community.
Yeah, I don't know if I would be the person to write that, but I would absolutely read that.
Yeah, we just put that
if
out
somebody
out
there. Yeah, somebody write that, because I would love to read that. Yeah, so Hestia has absolutely. I mean, I think that there's often this idea that gods are not relevant anymore, that there's always this, even in the way that we speak of gods, we'll say, oh, Hestia, the ancient Greek goddess, or we use this kind of distancing language, when, for me, I work with Hestia. I don't worship her. We have very much a working relationship. But I find her very much to be a presence in my life, not like an idea, not just, I have this little Hestia figurine from Playmobil. They made little ancient Greek god, another god, little figure. So I have that, and she's not just a little Playmobil figure on my altar. She is someone who I do have conversations with, and I feel like we oftentimes view them as ideas or as fantasies, and for me, that has not been my reality. Mm-hmm. And so having lived with this, where I knew about her all my life, then going and talking to people, and people are like, Hestia, who's that? I'm like, oh, okay. I get why that was the other reason she wanted me to write this book, because, there is a lack of knowledge. So, okay, get out of your bubble and go talk to people and write this book so people can learn.
Yeah, she's not on the tip of the tongue for people who talk about, Greek mythology and Greek myths, but yeah, she was incredibly important to Greek people, and yeah, I have always been fascinated by her, just as the representation of what I think living in community and being human. Like, I've always kind of thought of her in that way. So it was nice to see someone else who was like, oh yeah, Hestia. But so before we get to our game of chance at the end, I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about what's coming up. I know you've got another book in the works, and this will come out in March. So think about if you got anything coming up in March too, to let people know about.
No, actually, this is okay. So I'm finishing up the edits on the third book, which they just in the last couple of weeks we got the title, and so it's The Natural Home's Will of the Year, cooking, crafting, decorating, and magic for every Sabbath. It's basically I went through each Sabbath, and I have things, decorations, altar decorations, crafts to make, recipes, rituals that you can do. So you could go through the entire book and you have ideas for the entire year to kind of connect to the various Sabbats and kind of bring them into your life. And that is coming out fall of 2023. So
when this come out, you can probably pre-order it.
I think, that probably is the case. So yes, please pre-order. Pre-orders are very important for authors. And it's kind of a merging of the last two books in taking the idea of bringing magic into your everyday life and the stuff that you do, and also the importance of the home and ritual. Like in the Hestia book, I have a whole chapter on how to make your own wheel of the year. Where you go, okay, these are the important things for me. I'm going to put this on my calendar, and I'm going to write my rituals and my what it's going to mean. So it's basically those two ideas merged together in a book where I did a whole bunch of crafts and cooking and decorating and took a whole bunch of pictures. So it's very similar. It'll look very similar to So Witchy, where because all the pictures in So Witchy, most of them I took myself.
Oh, wow. Okay.
There's a few stock images in there. Yeah, I took those pictures while I was homeless, so it was a wild 6 weeks.
I bet.
So that's the book that I'm working on. I'm finishing up the edits, and it'll come out in 2023. And then personally, what I'm working on is I've got a Patreon where a lot of it tends to be the cauldron in which a lot of my ideas get formulated before they get put to paper. And then to my website and Instagram and that sort of stuff is all the stuff I'm working on.
Yep. I'll link to all that stuff in the notes too, so people can get to it easily. I will say, if people have not seen So Witchy, it is a large format paperback, and it has gorgeous photography in it, gorgeous pictures. It is not. It is. It's more like a art book in some ways, like, because of all this, you get like all of this lovely photograph. It's not just describing the things or line drawings; like you actually get to see finished products and things like that. So it is really lovely. And if you wanted to leave it out on your coffee table, it would not look amiss. So
thank you. That means a lot, because I had not taken photographs before this book. So it was a learning process. And I really fear that I may have driven the art director to drink, because there was a lot of notes back going, can you not? And me going, okay, I will do better this next time.
Yeah, no, I thought it was lovely. I thought it was really lovely. All right. So for our last question, I'm a Scorpio. And so I like to talk about things we're not supposed to talk about, which is partly why I started a podcast. And I don't know how to do chit chat, apparently. So I will roll a die. It's a little D&D die. Okay. When I said I knew about LARPing, I wasn't kidding. I played D&D with my family, and I was a LARPer back in the day. We played Vampire the Masquerade. Awesome.
Yeah, that was my LARP as well.
So yeah, back in the day, it's been a while, but so I will roll this, and then depending on what number I roll, you'll get a question about death, sex, religion, politics, or money. And if I roll a 6,
okay,
you get to pick which one you want.
Oh, okay.
2, sex. Well, we didn't talk about that at all.
Okay,
so this is great.
Well,
so how would you incorporate not magic or sewing magic into sex magic, or for a spell for sex? How would you do that?
Oh, you could do a lot of stuff with not magic, with kind of tying up, bondage, that sort of thing. I would absolutely, especially if you have any kind of hangups. I could imagine that you could do some tying up where, as you are releasing the, you tie up what you have your hang up about, and then by through orgasm and through release, and then releasing those knots kind of let go of that hang up. And then costuming, I mean, come on, you could absolutely use your sewing skills to come up with all sorts of costuming for role play to get.
Yes.
No, I all of this is, you could absolutely work sewing magic and not magic and all of that kind of into to the point of you could embroider your sheets and your pillows for working with if you have any impetus or fertility. Absolutely, you could be putting sachets under your pillows or embroidering fertility symbols on your sheets. You could go all out and do a whole linen set of quilt and everything if you're having fertility issues. So like I could keep listing ideas.
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, I always think of like the bed as an altar in a way. Like it is kind of the altar to your relationship with your person or people, depending on who you are. And I, to put that kind of care into it totally makes sense to me.
Yeah. I think, again, the idea that our lives are more interconnected than modern life would have us think. And what you do in your bedroom, both magically and energetically and physically, has impact on the rest of your life. So if you are beginning, you've never done any sewing or making or anything in your life, and you want to bring some of that, make a little sachet. Like you don't even have to be really good at embroidery to take a pencil and, trace a little penis or a vagina symbol on there and stitch it up, and then fill that with herbs and crystals for fertility or for, passion, and slip that underneath your pillow. Like I have a little cross stitch because I do cross stitch as well, and I've done a bunch of different things, but I have a little penis one and a little vagina one for, I was just like, I wonder if I can cross stitch a penis. Yes, you can. You can cross stitch anything. But go ahead, and you don't even have to, it doesn't have to be elaborate. It doesn't have to be obvious. You can just, on one of the little corners of your sheets, in red, do a few stitches and tuck that in there, and then you've got that intention, and you've set that intention, and you're working that magic. And then make a special bag for your toys and for your all your condoms or lube or whatever you have that you use, where you can imbue the bag with your intentions, with protective energies for if it's your condoms or your birth control or whatever, or pleasure and passion energies if it's for your toys. And something like just a simple drawstring bag is not going to be that. That's going to be a beginner thing that you can do. And you don't even have to embroider. There is a wonderful company called Spoonflower that prints on fabric, and you can either make your own design if you're crafty like that, or you can go on there, and there are tons of artists who have made fabric patterns. And so you can go on there, and I guarantee you will find some symbol that will speak to you and speak to your intention, that you can then order a quarter yard of fabric, a fat quarter, and turn that into a bag for a very simple drawstring bag for what your to hold your stuff, your toys, and your all of that. So there are plenty of ways that you could bring that magic through making into your bedroom for better, happier, more pleasurable sex.
Yeah. I love that you just hit the ground running. I was like, whoa, that was awesome.
Oh, yeah.
It's like she has ideas. She's ready to go. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I won't say that some of those ideas have not already been put into the real
I would think no less than that. Yeah. That's awesome. Well, hopefully your Patreon folks can benefit from that too. Like maybe you can do
awesome
for your Patreon folks.
Yeah, do a thing on there. No, I encourage people to make. I encourage people to just give it a try. Mm-hmm. Even if sewing isn't your thing, there's going to be a craft out there that you're going to enjoy, that you can participate in, and that you can then bring magic in. Like mm-hmm. I wrote So Witchy, and it's about sewing, but I want it to encourage people and give people ideas of other ways that they can bring that magic intention into their making. Yeah. I think that there is something very special about making something with your own hands. Mm-hmm. And that's, it's an act of creation, and it's by itself is an act of magic, that you are creating something out of nothing, out of these raw materials. So why not bring that intention in there? Yeah. If nothing else, I hope people come away from my books with that idea and that encouragement.
Yeah. And I do think the tone in your books really puts that forward. Like, you can do this, this is not, it's not rocket surgery or whatever. It's I
believe in you all. I believe everybody can do some sort of crafting.
Yeah. And I mean, I feel that way about writing too. Like, it is, for me, writing's really empowering to kind of get my thoughts out in the world and see them and do that. And I wish that for other people. And, writing may not be your thing. Sewing may not be your thing. Cooking may not be your thing. Maybe you're a candle maker. Maybe you're a soap maker. Maybe you're a musician. All of those things have that power, I think, that creative, generative power to kind of put our will in the world and see how we think about things or what we think about things. So yeah, it's nice. And I'm glad to know another fellow cheerleader to get that stuff out there.
Yeah. I like that. I like that term, cheerleader. Yeah, that's what we do.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Raechel, thank you so much for being on the show. This was delightful. I'm looking forward to the new book, and hopefully we'll have you back on. Sounds great.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. It's been fun talking about all this.
Excellent. WitchLit is a production of Thousandfold Press. Our intro music is Cosmic Glow by Andrew Kay, and our outro music is Voices by Alexander Shanekar. Transcripts and all our previous episodes are available at witchlitpod.com, and you can follow us on Instagram at witchlitpod. Thanks for listening and for reading witchy.